folks. Welcome back to the H Factor on the iHealth channel, iHealth Radio. New day, new show. Awesome topic. It's something that we've alluded to in multiple shows, but we never took the time to discuss in depth. And today we will do that. And this is the topic of the importance of sleep and also, the problem of a lack of sleep that we have in today's society for various reasons. But with me today, I have someone who's an expert in this matter. Dr. Dylan Petkus is going to guide us and take us through the journey of sleep and how is it important and what we need to do to fix ourselves, and our sleep patterns and so on and so forth, so we can stay healthy and the relationship of all the above. Doctor, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Listen, it's a pleasure. As you and I were talking prior to the show, I really had covered the importance of sleep. We talk fitness, we talk wellness a lot of times in different shows, and we always and we talked about with some coaches and things, and we always refer to like the importance of sleep as part of a full complete package. But we never actually talk about why people are not sleeping and what's the importance of real sleep, in terms of a medical aspect of it and the breakdown of what causes lack of it, sleep apnea and all those things. As a matter of fact, my wife and I were just joking today, literally about it, and so sleep is it's the most important thing to me. I cannot. I'm a zombie if I don't sleep enough. That's just for me, for example. And then also snoring is a big deal when someone is not getting enough or maybe not a position. So there's a lot of things that refer to sleep in our life and affect it. So, doctor, first things first, as always, take us a little bit through your journey and your expertise as a specialist in this particular area of, medicine.
Yeah, so in terms of like my journey with this, because you have doctors who, a lot of time they will specialize something that was a part of their own journey. Okay, because there's very few doctors who are like, man, I really, I don't have personal connection. I don't have a personal connection with this disease. Let me go. Usually there's a personal connection to it. So with sleep for me, long ago, I was having a lot of my own, breakdowns in my sleep, right? Of where it was like, having nights where it's like, okay, wake up once or twice. You don't really think anything of it at first. You're just like, whatever. And then like sort of, and you only ever notice this when looking back at it, right? It's like, oh man, I was starting to drag. And then I decided coffee is great. 2 cups of coffee. Let's go 3. Let's do coffee instead of water. Coffee is basically all water, so let's just kind of that's fine. But then really devolving to a point where me waking up like maybe like pretty much every hour on the hour there, and just like absolutely brutal getting through the day. At the time I was in grad school, and just like I would just remember like being in meetings and like in the beginning of meetings, because meetings are boring. Let's be honest. But in the beginning of the meeting, like already like kind of nodding off, like really not be able to hold a conversation or trying to work, and just like you ever just like look at a screen and you can see stuff there, but like it just doesn't go into your head. Like that's how I live. So being able to like really see that as a problem, and then go through the process where you go to your primary care doctor, right? Like family medicine, which is part of my background. Then you go to a sleep specialist, and then maybe if you're lucky, when this happened for me, at home sleep studies weren't really a thing yet, but go to a sleep lab, and then you're told all sorts of things, right? Like I was told I have moderate sleep apnea, other sort of issues there, which didn't really make sense because I don't really look like someone who used to be very large. But like, you have these issues come up, and then you do a lot of the typical things, whether it's from like CPAPs, the mouthpieces, melatonin, all the things, but like still not making progress here. So that's when like when you wrestle with an issue, and then like you're really forced, like, okay, let me kind of come at this a different angle. And that's kind of what I had to do there. And that's, the kind of the beginning of my journey, which we'll go through my own issue. We want to talk more about that, but then also bringing those lessons to patients, et cetera, locally, virtually, all that good stuff.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I have to say, not all the doctors that I've spoken to had a personal relationship with whatever practice that they have, or at least specialty. Some of them they just love what they specialize on based on I guess their education. When you're in med school, for example, you have different ways of growing into the meds level, and then as a doctor, you get to pick different specialties, and based on whatever your I guess ambitions or liking, you do it. But you have a more unique perspective because you really were a patient yourself of this particular I mean, it's a medical condition or health condition that can really be brutal on people, and we're going to talk about the damage and all the I guess the ramifications of lack of sleep, period, and what it could do to everything, whether in personal life, the physical aspect, and everything else, and affects everybody around you as well. But you had that. That's awesome. And then so you were in school, and then you decided, okay, this is my area. I'm gonna get into it, and you did. And so and by the way, I know that there's, like you mentioned, sleep clinics and things like that. I've seen those. I've heard about them. But you never think, like, I mean, is there a specialist that actually does this? I mean, or are the techs, or are there really doctors that actually behind this particular aspect of helping people?
Yeah. So sleep doctors, right? That'll be kind of a more of a specialist. And the I know, because like when we say sleep, for most of the population, we're thinking about, am I falling asleep quickly? Am I staying asleep? Am I waking up and feeling refreshed? Which are I would call them like subclinical sleep issues, right? Because a sleep specialist, they're going to be really honed in on like certain things that they're not in the everyday conversation, like night terrors, bruxism, like all these very very, very clinical issues that normal day people don't experience here. So sleep doctors are really great for those entities, and they can help with different aspects, right? Like being able to determine, okay, what may be an appropriate treatment for sleep apnea, right? But a lot of times, who's the first doctor you bring a conversation to your sleep about? It's usually your primary care doctor, right? So whether it is family medicine, whether it is internal medicine, I mean, those are going to be the main two. That's who's more so on the front lines, and that's why we'll do what we can in that capacity. Anything beyond that, yeah, where it does really become medical. We're talking like heart failure causing central sleep apnea, like all these things that are going to be smaller percentage of the population. A sleep doctor would be able to dive into that, but also like really the grand majority of the issue is more of these subclinical pictures there. If that makes sense.
Guys, well, so again, for the common person, I mean, we all know what sleep is, right? I mean, we grew
Yeah.
up sleeping, since you're a baby, you sleep enough, hours, hopefully, and then as you grow up, the patterns, shift. But so let's define that. I mean, as you said, I mean, there's the falling asleep, and there's the while you sleeping. There's other things that come up while you sleeping, like snoring, things like I was making a joke earlier. But really, let's define the status or the state of sleep, and what it means to us in terms of a human being, and the health of it. And then let's talk about some of the conditions that are, or problems that are, for people that are not getting enough sleep. And then ultimately, let's talk about some of the reasons why they're not. And hopefully, then we can talk about really what are some of the, I guess, the treatments that are available to help people get better, and avoid any of the bad things to their health.
Yeah. So I think that the big mindset shift people need to have around sleep is like not viewing it as this like nice to have thing, right? Which I get may be the case when you have kids, okay? And
Yeah, I
like,
know.
all
Been
these
there,
other
done that.
things. That's a whole nother podcast episode or show. But like sleep is a basic function, okay? Because if you had trouble with breathing, if you couldn't see one morning, if you couldn't hear one morning, you would freak out, okay? Rightfully so. Okay, and if you don't, maybe we have a different conversation. But like sleep is such a basic phenomenon of how you're able to like rejuvenate, repair your cells at night, restore neurotransmitters, all these different things. But like I think as modern civilization has evolved, it has started to be looked at as like a luxury rather than like no, like this is just as essential as breathing here. Okay. Like it should be easy. It should just happen, but it doesn't. And now we have like a culture of like, well, to sleep well, you need to do red light therapy while doing a handstand and, like all these things that happen. Right. So like in the approach, then, like you need to be asking yourself, not so much like, what can I do to affect my sleep? Okay. A little bit nuanced. You're like kind of like trying to force this thing, but like how can I allow sleep to happen more easily here? Because like your body should naturally be able to do it. There's just a lot of things in the way of that. Okay, whether for instance like the time someone's up at night, what we're on right now, screens, all these different things get in the way, and like we have to be able to like decide like, okay, what's getting in the way of that? Because like I mean, like when I went to high school, cell phones were starting to become a thing, and like I doubt most parents were like, my teenager can't sleep, right? But nowadays, now we're all confused. Like, why can't kids sleep nowadays? What's going on here? But it's being able to really recognize like it's kind of things falling apart that shouldn't there. That's why it's like really yes, I know medical issues weight abound, but like even at a primary care standpoint, you need to be able to have those conversations, because when we think about sleep, again, not only is it a basic thing, it really represents how your whole body works. Okay. Because if someone can't, I mean, I hear this all the time. People like, I'll talk to them and they'll be like patients, oh, hey, like, I sleep 3 hours, but otherwise I'm healthy. Like, that doesn't,
I've heard that before. Yeah.
that doesn't really go together. That's like, I broke my ankle, but otherwise I can walk pretty, like, no, that's not it. So people need to appreciate it. It's really a representation of like your whole body health if you're not sleeping well, and being able to approach it as such, that allows for actual change to happen there.
Well, thank you. That well, it's amazing. I love what you said that this is not something it's good to have. It is almost a mandate for our health. I mean, we are supposed to sleep a certain amount of time to reset our body and our cells, and everything has to kind of group itself and just take a break, if you want to call it that way. I mean, that's really the best thing. And historically, people pretty much, we know this from just stories of grandparents and great grandparents. People slept early, like by sunset, they're gone. I mean, there's no there a century ago, whatever. There was no real entertainment and places where you can be at late hours, so you basically be sleeping after sunset, and you wake up in the dawn, and at dawn, and that's it, and life goes on again during the daylight. But that's shifted with progress, and you just mentioned the technology and the screen stuff, and that's becoming more relevant. And even from a psychiatry perspective, there have been studies that is affecting even the psyche and all how people are behaving, things like that. But this was supposed to be something, and you mentioned something that's really interesting, because I've heard that story before, at least that line before, and many people are like, oh, I get 5 hours, 3 hours, and I'm good. I wake up, I don't sleep much. But what's the detriment? What is the damage that's doing to you, right? That's a big deal. And from a health perspective, I can tell you personally, I don't get my beauty sleep for at least 8 hours, I am not functioning well. I mean, I'm literally a zombie. I can't, focus. Very grouchy, and I can get really angry very easy. All these things, I mean, are at least my experiences. Like that's how I see it. But from your expertise as a specialist in this particular area, uh, you know, let's talk about like the reasons why people don't sleep, because I think that's really for our audiences what they need to avoid. Really, I mean, if you know what the problem is, there's a good chance you can prevent it. I mean, I'm always talking about preventative health in general with different topics, but this is a big deal here. How do we prevent these kind of concepts of lack of sleep? Now, and also, if you don't mind, doctor, if you can just maybe define some of these, I guess, diagnoses such as sleep apnea and anything else that you might
When I start
want
to
to share.
become concerned,
Yeah,
so
yeah, please.
uh yeah, definitely more practical terms. So like when I always like to look like a clock like over the progress of the night of like where are the major areas, because those all tell you different things, right? Because it's like a car, right? You have a different problem if you can't start it versus if you go 45 miles an hour and you hear a noise, right? So with sleep, again, starting from kind of going to bed here, it takes you more than 20 minutes to fall asleep. Okay. Now this doesn't count as you just like laying in bed and like reading. You're not trying to go to sleep. It's like, all right, bedtime, lights out, head on pillow, more than 20 minutes. This is, if we want to get super technical, you have now like the sleep latency is starting to get too long. You're now falling into primary insomnia. Okay. Where like going into sleep. Okay. Well, really, primary being like by itself, secondary would be like, let's say if you were on some sort of medication and causing you to be excited, right? But primary medication, onset insomnia. Okay. Primary onset. Now we're in a medical lecture here. But onset, it makes sense. You're trying to start sleep, like the beginning of sleep. Then, and we'll go back around to like the main things that feed into these. Then in the middle, because you're trying to maintain sleep, maintenance insomnia here. Okay. And by the way, if you learn this and then you go to your doctor and you can say, I think I had maintenance insomnia, that will save you like 10 minutes of having to go through like history. So there you go. I believe
Thank you.
but that's waking up. Now, there is like, because in a sleep lab, or I mean, some people maybe with Oura rings, I know it's or even like a Whoop or any of these sort of devices, there's something called, it's very catchy. WASO is what it's called in the sleep literature, but basically how that acronym breaks down is how often are you awake in the middle of the night here? Okay. And when it goes above a certain threshold, then that's problematic. Now, we can kind of tell this is going to be hard to track unless you have a ring or something like that and you know it's good data. So honestly, rule of thumb for like everyone listening, well, I guess it'd be a rule of 3 fingers. If you're getting up more than like 3 times a night, that's not good there. That's because like once, okay, twice, now we're in a gray zone. 3 times, let's start to be concerned about this here. And that's maintenance insomnia. Okay. And then the very last one. So again, so it was onset, like coming on, maintenance in the middle. So the last one is basically just like, I mean, I think more colloquially, it's like early awakening would be it. You get up at 3, you get up at 4, you're like, all right, I got my get up and go. But then like 2 hours later, 5, 6, you're like, oh crap, why didn't I sleep here? All right. That's going to be kind of that morning insomnia there. So that's kind of the main ones. Now within that, you have different things that cause that, right? So like sleep apnea, where you're not breathing in the middle of the night, waking up, that's going to fall into maintenance insomnia here. But it can also cause sort of the morning one, the early awakening, right? Because if this happens for people, they start the night out with the CPAP on, right? And then, maybe it's 3 a.m. They get woken up by it. They take it off. They can't fall back asleep, right? So it kind of goes into different categories depending on when it is, okay? Now, what drives each one, right? So for the onset, going to bed, I would say this is going to be mediated more by nervous system being overactivated, okay? So this is when, like, whether it's relaxation coming into the picture, like that's going to be a really big component to it, okay? Now, that's like more of like, what's your nervous system going into? Well, there's really 2 layers. There should be a grid here. This is getting highly educational, but nervous system. So I'm going to say the 2 biggest things are going to be nervous system and then also your circadian rhythm, okay? What's your circadian rhythm? It's the internal timing mechanism of all the processes in your body, right? Sleep should happen at a certain time, okay? Unless you're on night shift. And if you're on a night shift, you should be on day shift, just saying. You'll live longer. Anyway, so with the nervous system, it'll be kind of above a certain baseline that prevents you from falling asleep. The nervous system issue with maintenance insomnia, this is going to be when you have a high, but really a lower threshold, which I know is confusing, but you have a lower arousal threshold. So the most common way that people know about this is when, moms, especially, in the first 10 years of being a mom, there is that listening out for your kids thing, which I'm not sure if that actually has a medical term, but it's a very real thing. And that will cause many times like women to like wake up because they think like a little noise over there is like, they're kind of like trained to do that, very hardwired. Their threshold is lower. So if you're a light sleeper, you have a lower threshold. If you're a heavy sleeper, like a bomb could go off and you still be asleep, you have a very high threshold of arousal. So if you're waking up in the middle of the night, you have a lower threshold of arousal. Okay. And then towards the end, I mean, that's more a circadian piece there where cortisol just going up too early there. Now, kind of wrapping back, we're going all over the place here, but that's fine. Circadian aspects where it takes too long to fall asleep, your body's not making enough melatonin to help you drift off. Okay. And then maintenance insomnia, you're not maintaining a high enough amount of melatonin because melatonin should be like a wave. Like think of an ocean wave here. Okay. It should be like really big coming in, and then a bigger wave is able to go further upshore, right? But if a small wave doesn't do that. So like the big wave helps you fall asleep, and then as it like kind of drips out through your body, that's an interesting visual, but yeah, well, we just ruined the whole nice ocean wave. But now if you have enough, it helps you get through the rest of the night. But if you don't, then you're gonna wake up. So those are the kind of the major factors there.
I love it, by the way. I think you're doing perfectly fine because I mean it's very clear. We have three main stages here. It's just starting to sleep, and you need to have certain factors to get you in, and hopefully, if you can, that's great. But I think the bigger problem is once you get to sleep, if you can maintain it, through a good distance of the night. I mean, there's a few hours, in a particular sleep time, hopefully 8 hours. I'm assuming about 4 or 5 hours of that is the middle, and then you start kind of slowly getting into that last, phase where you have to start getting ready to wake up. And I love what you said about that wave. I mean, I'll call that tsunami of melatonin. You just like,
Yeah.
you got to get a whole bunch of that stuff to just crash. But let's talk about that, not melatonin, right? I mean, we hear that all the time. I mean, it's very common. You can get a supplement, but what does it really do? I mean, we know that it helps to sleep here. I mean, obviously that's the purpose. But let's talk about I guess the chemical functionality of it and how it triggers, the body to mellow down.
Yeah.
As it sounds.
So good. So with melatonin, I want to make two categories here, if permittable by the grander audience here. So one is like what your body makes, and then like the supplements, the gummies, the drops, all that stuff. So what your body makes. Now, okay, when I say this, chemically they're the same, but we need to consider the differences between the two. Okay, so when your body makes melatonin, it goes from your pineal gland into like your cerebral spinal fluid. Okay, if everyone gets out their neuroanatomy brain, kind of let's just say the middle of the brain. And then it goes in there, and then it goes throughout your body. Okay. Now this is super important. Okay. Because imagine if you had like a glass of water, right? And you put a dropper of blue dye into it, right? It's going to be super high concentration and then spread out.
Yep.
Okay. That sends a very particular type of signal to your whole body. Okay. Because for sleep to happen, it's a progression of your mind shutting off and then your body shutting off. Okay. Because in certain stages, like it's in deeper stages of sleep, well, like kind of middle stages of sleep, that's when your brain will paralyze your muscles. Okay. If you ever had night paralysis, it's terrifying, but it's normal physiology. Well, not the terror part, but you know what I mean. So that's really the directionality that needs to happen. Okay. When you take it in a supplemental form, you do the exact opposite. Okay. Because it goes into your gut, right? And then it spreads out through your body. And then the last place it ends up in is your brain. So there's going to be a big difference in how that should be. And that's why, like I will say 98 times out of 100, the typical story I'll hear from people taking melatonin, it was great when it started, it kind of worn off, and now I'm not sure if it's doing anything. That's like the stages of grief, if you will, on that one. And this is a big part of why. But then the other thing is, again, when you have that like melatonin wave here, right? To your point, when you take it in a supplement, it is like a tsunami. Okay. It's like goes really high, but then also just like a tsunami, when it goes really high, then when the water pulls back into the ocean, it's really fast. So it doesn't really stay around. Yes, there'll be flooding and all that. But for the sake of this example, it goes back into the ocean pretty quickly. So when that happens, again, it's a different signal, right? But then just like with the flooding with the tsunami here, same thing happens with melatonin, right? where yes, it goes up and down more quickly, but some of it hangs around in the morning. So that's why another part of that melatonin, the melatonin gummy story, is you feel groggier in the morning, which is partly from melatonin being too high, right? But then the other thing, and this is where circadian rhythm come in, is so your circadian rhythm, it's a clock, right? And you're listening, close your, well, if you're driving, don't close your eyes. But if you're safe, you can close your eyes. Uh, you know, we think about a clock, right? Like think of like a one of those like fancy Rolexes where you can like see all the gears. That's what your circadian rhythm is like. It's all these biochemicals sort of like interacting with each other so that they work. Okay. And to simplify it further, you can just think of them on seesaws because, I mean, I've been on more seesaws than I've seen nice watches, so that works for me. So with this, when melatonin goes up, cortisol goes down. Okay. So thus, when like I said earlier, when like the early awakening, it's because if cortisol went up and melatonin went down, right? Now, if you influence melatonin to be too high, you are now going to lower cortisol. And mechanistically, how that happens, melatonin will block one of the receptors that allows cortisol to work. And then now you're groggy in the morning. But then guess what? If you don't raise your cortisol in the morning, then you don't set your circadian rhythm up for the day and you're tired and then you can't sleep. Like it becomes this problem there. Whereas natural melatonin doesn't have that problem. Okay. Those are the kind of two main things there. And it's why, because like melatonin essentially, it will, like, recently we set clocks. I don't daylight savings. I don't want to talk about it. It's just silly. But
Just happened, huh?
it's like the silliest thing ever. But like that's what melatonin does. It like sets your clock and it's like nighttime. Okay, it's like nighttime. Let's go. And then all the nighttime things will happen because it's not just melatonin that's involved in sleeping at night. It's a whole cascade of neurotransmitters and hormones like GABA, serotonin, even norepinephrine, antidiuretic hormone. All these different things come out after melatonin kind of sets things to night mode there. So that's why you need to be able to make sure that's done correctly, right? Like more naturally would be better than taking from a pill will work, don't get me wrong, but like, if you have an option to,
And
build this, do it a little bit more
natural.
gently, that would be advised.
Well, so doctor, let's talk about that, because uh, people today are more easily persuaded of the route of supplements versus maybe doing something naturally to the body to reset the rhythm, to reset the actual melatonin production and all this stuff. So how can we guide people to maybe trigger that, which is the more natural way to get it really flowing correctly and then get that nice, sweet, sleep, throughout the night without anything. Because as you state, yeah, I mean, like everything else, we can get all the supplements we want, but they're still brought up in a like you said, it's the basic description. They're going through the gut first before they get into the bloodstream, and then they get to the neural system where it's supposed to be originally generated. So it's kind of like, go in reverse. Yes, it gives you that rush, it gives you that stuff, but it's not consistent. But if it fails, then you have worse, ongoing issues because now you're
Yeah.
almost addicted to it because you have to maintain it, it's almost like playing against your regular melatonin production. Am
Yeah.
I getting even that right?
No, you're right. You're instead of going with your rhythm, you're trying to like swim against the waves, pretty much.
Well, we don't want that, right?
We don't want that.
Well, all right. So
Um,
so so Doc, what would you say to people to avoid that, and how can we maybe reverse that and get our melatonin naturally, set so we can have a nice, sweet sleep night?
I would say it kind of ties in what we mentioned in the beginning. We're talking about like screens, right? It's not just
Mhm.
screens. It's not like if you stare at I have another monitor over here, it's off. Like that's not the problem. It's the light coming from it, right?
Blue light.
So like whether you're watching, like you see my glasses, and I finally figured out why you were like you had this red like tint to you, and I was trying to convince you it's just my aura and all. I'm joking, but I have a blue light filter on my computer. I was like, that's it. That's why there's a little bit of red glow on me. So like however you can do that is going to be huge. I mean, like even if if someone doesn't want to go out and like buy something, you can literally like just take a pair of sunglasses you got, and where I'm at night. And then yes, you can also listen to that song. I'm not sure if anyone even knows what that is anymore, but it's like from the 80s. But like that will reduce the quantity and the quality of light to help your body then make melatonin at the right time there. So that would probably be like I mean, that's usually number one thing I tell people.
Well, I know there's a lot of talk about the Blu-rays that we have from the screens, the phones, and all the stuff. And I think the computer screens are one thing. I mean, not everybody's behind a computer, at night, but everybody now is with their phone at bed with maximum light, and it's really it. I mean, I have like a screen, protector, as you said, like a blue, cover and a blue light cover, and I have also glasses, and it's still not enough. But I think what I've heard so far is that much of advice that you hear around is that you need at least to be off the screens an hour or plus, before you go to bed. Otherwise, you basically are almost simulated or stimulated to actually stay awake. Is that a myth or is that reality?
No, that's true. So it will, so the intensity will vary because like even if like I don't know, like what is the most like natural thing we could do? Like if we had a campfire, like that's a pretty natural light source, I guess. Uh,
It's red, which
that's
is good.
yeah, that still would be a sufficient enough light quantity or intensity to keep your mind activated or your brain rather activated. So having that like gap, even if it's like some people are like, oh yeah, I have everything filtered, I'm all great, I'm wearing 2 pairs of blue blockers, great, cool. But like it's still like having very very low, and especially we're kind of getting the field here, but like with a device, there's a lot of other things with it, not just the quantity of it, but also like you know this is going to be polarized light, which has a different biological effect. There's like, also something called as light flicker. Do you remember trying to take a picture on a computer screen with like some of the first generation iPhones?
Yeah.
Like it has this line
Hmm.
that goes down here, really pulling from the
Yeah.
memory banks. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the light we're all seeing right now, unless someone's on some crazy special monitor, it's actually flickering, right?
High
So
speed.
that has, yeah, it's just flicker. You can't perceive it unless you go around taking pictures of stuff with an iPhone 3. Then that's
You'll see it.
that's interesting. But otherwise, like you're not going to see that, but it's biologically affecting you there. So that's really the reason why like people say like 1 hour, 2 hours. People will find their sweet spot. Of course, I really find with my patients like people have very individual responses to these things. Some people have to be like 3 hours. Some people could be like 30 minutes. But you just got to find that spot for you.
Thank you. So a couple of things that people that I hear all the time, and maybe you can literally give us some guidance here, or at least clarify things for us. One is, when we talk nutrition and food and health, there's usually a discussion about not eating late, because then your system is operational and you're trying to digest, and therefore that prevents you from sleeping. Is that a thing? And similarly, we hear about, let's say, caffeine intake or anything with some sort of, I guess, a potent, drink that's
Uh-huh.
going to get you wired up. And then ultimately, there's other things such as stress and or maybe just overthinking about things. So some people sometimes I mean, today we live in a world where you take your work with you home, right? I mean, and you have a deadline first thing in the morning, or you have a meeting that's 8 o'clock in the morning, and you're like thinking about it, and you basically have a white night. You can't even go to sleep because you're so focused on what's going to happen. Your mind is like, working double time. So let's talk about, are those things that are real effect, and if they are, how can we? Well, I mean, ultimately the result will be
Yeah,
like
just
to
don't do the
stop.
things.
Exactly.
Stop
I
it.
mean, but it is a fact. I mean, these are real facts, correct,
Yeah.
Doc?
So how that works? Because so like one of the things I always encourage people to do is like don't don't see like health tips like as these flashcards where it's like 30 different things. You want to like it's all really together and cohesive. And what I mean by that, for instance, eating late, right? I was going to mention this with melatonin, but so again, we had the seesaw, right? Melatonin, cortisol, but there's also like many different variants of this, right? So like there's also melatonin and dopamine. They're on a seesaw. Melatonin and insulin, they're on a seesaw. Okay. And this is where eating too late comes in, right? You eat, insulin goes up. That's a seesaw, and that will impair. Now, there's some complicated biochemistry in between, but we'll keep it simple. And when insulin goes up, that will actually reduce melatonin production at night. There, okay. And like same thing, you mentioned stress, right? What happens when we're stressed out? Cortisol. Oh, here we are. Here we are again.
Thing.
Same mechanic there. So that's why, like, you don't have that sort of common way to sort of thread things together is important.
Brain chemicals, huh? I mean, we need to. I mean, but that's the thing. This is I love this discussion because you're bringing things that sometimes most of us in the common world we don't think about brain chemical and chemical reaction and all things that affect it. We just think we're working and it's all good and something is off. But only when things don't work out our way we start maybe asking questions. But sometimes it's too late, and therefore we need someone such as yourself to get that because a lot of people try to get different meditation, maybe listening to some music to calm them down. I'm not even sure if that works. I mean, because some people, you put music, they're not going to go sleep, or you put, even if it's just sounds, and you had a lot of sites and things where you can download these nice ocean waves or, water
Mhm.
river, it might work for some, it may not work for others because I've seen that happen. Those do work, doctor, or they're just basically again each person is different.
It's going to depend because remember when I was talking about like, kind of the two main ones, like is your nervous system messing things up? Is it your melatonin? If we wanted to add a layer of sleep apnea, is it your breathing that's messing things up? So it really depends. Like, okay, where is that individual thing? Well, even so, like, what's the biggest lever there? Because someone's going to have deficits in all three. But like, say a patient with sleep apnea, okay, if we had 10 minutes before bed and our options are to meditate or do some breath work. One of those is, I mean, if we did them together, that'd be way better. But like, you want to sort of pick and choose based on your needs there.
All right, so now the big question. You and I briefly mentioned it before, talked about it before the show. Mitochondria. Let's talk about that.
Okay, so yeah, let's go there. So with this is where when I came in when I said like when you got to think of sleep as like a basic function, right? And if we want to really break it down, it's like it's your body working in a certain fashion, right? And if we really go biophysical, work is just the energy exerted on something to move it. Like you push a block in the big world, you did some work. Okay. Maybe you didn't get paid for it, but in a physics textbook, it's work. But in the cells, you need energy to do any sort of work. Okay. What produces energy? Okay. And if we all pull out the powerhouse of the cell from like, high school, whenever that was, that's what that is, your mitochondria. So how this fits into sleep and why I was saying, again, common threads are really good ways to go about this. Mitochondria produce energy, right, to have that basic function. Okay. If you like people with mitochondrial diseases, right, they'll have issues with like basically everything. Breathing will be very hard and difficult, thermoregulation, like very, very basic stuff, and sleep, right? Why is that? Well, you need that biochemical energy to actually allow the cells to function, like for the right neurotransmitters get released, like some GABA over here, some, acetylcholine over there. You actually need your mitochondria to be functioning properly for that. Okay. And how your body works is essentially when it's trying to decide how to use this energy, it's like a budget. Okay. Like, say, if you have, X amount of dollars every month you allocate to a bunch of different things. Okay, cool. Next month, oh, budget's a little bit tight. Now you have a decision. You have your list and you have like gas, electric,
Prioritize.
and
Yeah.
then like I don't know, Netflix. Okay. One of those things is going to come off the budget that it's like the nice thing, right? But it's we don't really need this here. Okay. And we're kind of coming back to how like even evolutionary wise, sleep can sometimes be viewed as a luxury. Because all things considered, if you don't breathe, that's going to kill you. If you don't sleep, okay, it's going to be a bad day, right? But you'll still be alive, right? So sleep is one of those things on that budget there that will start to get sort of, things taken away from. So then that falls apart. But then the other big thing, because it's not just the energy side, because most people are aware like your mitochondria produce energy. That's great. ATP, awesome. But your mitochondria produce a lot of things. Okay. Think of it like a factory. It produces many things. Okay. Whether it's like free radicals, whether it is like even proteins go in and out of there, whole lot of stuff. One of the things it produces is actually melatonin. Okay. That is when they look at like, electron microscopes, which is the fancy way for microscopes that see really, really small things, you will see all the enzymes for melatonin in mitochondria here. So when your mitochondria aren't working well, then you're not producing as much melatonin there. And then that's how that all sort of fits together there.
So that's the factory. That's what we need to.
That's the thing, yeah.
That's where it all happens. All right. Well, thank you, Doc. So one more thing. Physical activity. Is there a particular time where we need to stop it so the body can wind up? Because some people sometimes they don't have time during the day and they decide to work out at night. Is that something that could affect, their stuff? I'm assuming yes, but just from your medical expertise, what's your take on that?
It depends on the person. So like some people who their nervous system's already shot, like working out too close to bed, could make things worse. Some people it may help. Okay. And I would say like if you were to force me to choose generally which would be better, like I don't know, my hand's raising in Zoom, it's trying to make me do my hand raise. But anyway, when you work out, the main benefit is more so your temperature dropping afterwards. That's what helps actually initiate sleep there for people. Now, I would say probably the best window, like probably 2 hours before at least. That would be kind of like the bare minimum. Closer than that is like really not good. But actually, let me kind of walk this back a little bit. So when that exercise is referred to, like, lifting, do your cardio, your Zumba, whatever, what have you. Now, Mother Evolution, always funny. The only exercise that you can do really close to bed that actually helps with sleep is high intensity interval training. Okay. Now, the interesting thing is that also, what is one high intensity interval thing some people do before bed with their significant other? This is a exercise joke here. But seriously, the like a very short burst of aerobic exercise actually helps with sleep if it's closer. But again, that's if someone's generally healthy. That may not be the case if someone has other medical contraindications, but in a more general healthy population, that would be the case.
Deep shot. That's it. Done.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so Doc, now another question is people travel. I mean, we happen to be on the same, I guess time zone right now, but some people sometimes travel. I just experienced jet lag, literally a couple of days ago. And I can tell you it's brutal when you have a 9 hour difference in the trip.
Ooh.
I mean, yeah, I mean it's just like it takes a couple of days to adjust, and that's you have to like really like fight it to get it there. So how do we? I mean, is there a formula to assist with that? I mean, I guess maybe there's a medical way to work throughout your trip to I guess reset or recalibrate in a way.
Yeah, the easiest way, and this is really strongly backed by the research literature, because again, we said the tale of melatonin, how it started, how it ended. Melatonin in a short term for jet lag specifically has really profound effects in terms of being able to shift someone's rhythm there. And how you would use it, and because we can get into like east versus west versus east protocols, and we would be here in another like 45 minutes. But like the number one thing to keep things simple and actionable,
yes, sir,
would be to, if you again, permitting, appropriate, all those good things, melatonin has been shown to, regardless of the direction you're traveling, taking it so that you're trying to mimic that wave, right? For like the first 3 days, you're trying to adjust there. That will help you shift a lot faster. Okay. And that would be probably the easiest thing for
So,
people there, because it
so
just go ahead.
no, so it's recommended to take a supplement of melatonin if you are traveling in a distance to like to almost expedite the process of your natural status.
Yeah, yeah, because if you take it, it can actually help entrain or kind of sort of retrain your own natural. Be like, hey, be hot, like make melatonin at this time here, okay. But like beyond like 4 or 5 days, then you enter that phase of where now like are we becoming dependent on melatonin? So um, some people won't be fully adjusted. I mean, obviously, it depends on the travel. You go from like Florida to Thailand, like that's gonna be hard either way. But it'll help accelerate those first 3 days. Like maybe add on like another, or I mean, help at, like accelerate things by like 30, 45 minutes per day in terms of advancing or delaying your rhythm.
All right, thank you. So now let's talk about the damage of lack of sleep. I mean, some of the, I guess, the health concerns or problems that can occur from someone who has I guess, a long-term lack of sleep, whatever it is. I mean, I'm sure not everybody comes to see a doctor, and unfortunately, I think that's across all the different problems that we have. We tend to not go to doctors until it's really bad, or at least we are
Yeah.
forced to go. I mean, that's unfortunate, but that's really a bad practice that we've adopted in general. People are, I'm good, I got this, I'm gonna fight through it, I'm gonna make it happen, but nothing happens until the body crashes. I mean, listen, I mean, we've seen it in movies. You could deprive someone from sleep. I mean, they go nuts, right? And I know that's probably a real thing. It's not a, just a movie thing. But the idea is, and by the way, doctor, correct me if I'm wrong here. But the idea is that we want to make sure that people know what would be the problem if they continue not sleeping correctly, and or they just have a limited amount of hours of sleep that is not sufficient for their body, and what does that to them in a long term.
Yeah, so it's gonna continue to cut that budget there. So when we think about this energetic budget, a big part of that is repairs, right? And if given the option to repair like your brain versus like, I don't know, you got a cut on your skin or something like that, or like your gut, brain loses every single time. Central nervous system loses every single time in that one because it's a very high maintenance area because it's the most energetic intensive, so it's the easiest to cut the budget from there. And also, again, evolutionary wise, what's going to kill you sooner? Being like kind of like, not as mentally sharp, or like not being able to digest food. You know, now, okay, we can argue for like a saber-tooth tiger, but let's exclude those for the time being. So a lot of the cognitive issues. So like short term, it's going to show up in mood. Is going to be the number one. Okay, and really, it like really when your sleep falls apart, it's just going to push you in a direction that you were kind of already going. So like if you're prone to depression, okay, there you go, more depression, anxiety, there you go. It's just going to kind of worsen those things. But the kind of the bigger thing that I think a lot of people downplay is the cognitive decline here. Okay. And like sometimes like when I'm talking about clinic, like, oh yeah, I would assume like all patients are like cognitively impaired if you have, which sounds really harsh, right? Like no one, like I'm cognitively impaired now, but if you have like one bad night of sleep, like let's say you get 5 hours instead of 8 hours, research has shown that you will have, if you looked in your cerebral spinal fluid, you would have some of those beta amyloid plaques, the same ones that they find in Alzheimer's from one bad night there.
Huh.
So you stack
Okay.
that up over years. This is why people like can't find words, when they're 50, or, they're just making silly mistakes, or they're walking in a room. They're like, why am I here? Really that form of cognitive decline, memory issues, brain fog. When you look at like Alzheimer literature or dementia literature, one of the big questions is like, how can we spot this early? Right. And like there's genetic studies over here, and they found some good things, like ApoE, we know about that. But like the number one factor that's really easy to identify is this cognitive slide here. Now, the problem with humans, we think we're great at everything at all times, right? We're the best at this, and also our kids are the best at that, right? So we can't really perceive our own cognitive impairment, right? you can on like the first bad day of sleep, but act like very quickly, like on day 3 and beyond, everything seems fine, but it's like really not. So then that just becomes like a low grade thing that just over time stacks up to like, this is, I mean, I think this is fundamentally why we're seeing such earlier onset of dementia, of Alzheimer's here, because it's just like 20 years of whether it's sleep issues or, I mean, there's a lot of other chronic health habits that will fit in that picture, but definitely cognitive is going to be, um, I mean, to me, the scariest one, because it's like, you know, there's,
Losing the
it's,
abilities. I
yeah,
mean,
it's just not fun. Um, then beyond that, it's just going to be, take your pick of whether it's going to like, if you have like a rusty link on a chain, it's just going to kind of blow that open. So like, let's say, you know, gut issues, a little bit of gut issues, it's just going to accelerate that. Maybe everyone in your family has some sort of autoimmune issue, Hashimoto's, etc. That's going to accelerate a lot faster. Another big area is going to be metabolically. You don't sleep well, and just weight loss is going to be hard. Hormones are going to get thrown off pretty early, whether it's going to drive low T in men, whether it's going to lower progesterone, estrogen in women. It just like affects everything. Like blood pressure is going to go up, heart attacks. Like it's just everything. This is why, like, when people are like, "I don't sleep," I'm like, let me not try to alarm you.
well, doctor, I can tell you. I mean, I this is me personally, and probably people can relate, and you can confirm or even help us understand more. Is that I listen the days I don't have enough sleep. I mean, or like I force myself not to sleep, enough. Your heartbeat is speeding up. I mean, I don't know. You feel
Mhm.
like your heartbeat is triple time, not double time. I mean, that's just the first thing. And then to your point, coherent, stuff is not there. You're very itchy or anything. You can snap very quickly and you're not there. And then I am literally shocked to hear like the connection with onset or early onset of Alzheimer's and dementia. And it is sad to realize that because of the lifestyle that we have today in this particular modern age of ours, that really are ruining ourselves, slowly but surely with the basic elements that are designed for us to actually be healthier for a longer term. I mean, like you said, sleep is important. It's part of life. We need to have it. Yet it's probably one of the areas, as you said, it's not in a budget, and we're gonna, do without it because we can do it. Now, a lot of maybe younger folks watching or listening right now think that they have the whole life and they have the energy. Because I can tell you this, me personally, I've experienced something that is unique because there was one week in my life. This is true story that I worked triple shifts, not double shift, triple shift for this particular week. This was years back, and I was literally sleeping, maybe 15, 20 minutes in between these shifts just to kind of like, you just clash. And there was after a certain point, 3 days down, I was completely like a zombie. I was just like awake. I couldn't go to sleep anymore. My whole system was crashed, and I was just like going. And it felt good for a minute, and then it just like everything shut down. And so I can tell you it was not a fun experience, and I would not do it again. And I don't even think I could do it, but this was something I've
It
experienced.
doesn't sound legal.
Well, I mean, no, it was a choice. It was just me doing it. It was I needed the money and I did it. So I mean, it was just that. But you know, besides that part, I mean, I think it was legitimate. It was too much overtime that I was doing. So it was it was with my own request. But the fact of the matter is, from physical, I mean, the first 3 days were very hard, and then after that, it kind of like I was like just awake. It's like your body is like on double shift working. But then after that, you were just like crashed, and it was just bad. It took a little minute to get back on track. And when you're at that age, this was like, I mean, I'm gonna age myself, but it's okay. It's not a secret. Over 30 plus years ago, this happened, and I was working, and it was just like an experience. But it's for someone that is young today, and you probably can think you can do all this stuff, but you don't know what that does for you. I mean, right now you just scared the hell out of me saying that, that could be the reason of me getting some early onset of dementia, Alzheimer's, and that's not something you want to, live with, if you are intended to live longer with very hardly recognizing things and remembering things. It's a difficult choice, to make. So we should uh, probably take care of our health and our sleep balance, early on throughout our life and maintain that as part of our practice to get healthy. Right, doctor?
Yes. I mean,
the answer
like,
is the answer is yes. I
I
love it.
distinct. Yes, I affirm this. Yeah, because I think because um, so when I speak with people who are like, they're reaching out for help or anything like that, there's kind of two camps of people. Oh, okay, there's a lot of camps, but like one of them is like their back is like against the wall sort of thing. Like, hey, the best time to fix this would have been like 3 years ago, right? But then like, things that like they're having that shut down, right? Maybe not as severe, but like, they're worried about keeping up with work. They're like the grouchy, grumpy parent all the time. The weekend is like pretty much broken promises and laying around and just doing nothing, right? That's one area. The other group is the like, I want to be preventative. All right. If I had a nickel for every person who said I want to be preventative, who actually like did a lot of things, I would have a lot of nickels. I don't have a quantum, like, the actual quantity on that, but like I could get something, I could pay for that Netflix subscription with all my nickels. Let's say that. So like people like just have this I call it like time elasticity, right? Of where like long term, like if you were standing on a train track and there was a train coming, but it was 8 miles away, you would still get off that train. There's no benefit to standing here at this time. But like for like sleep, like you mentioned, if you're staying at a point, if you continue to have a certain behavior, you're going to get hit by something 8 years later. Then why would you continue to stand there? Because people like don't really understand the sort of like time elasticity of it's coming. You should get out of the way from it, right? Because it's very obvious. The answer is very obvious. If I said if you don't sleep, well the next 5 nights, you're going to get Alzheimer's. You would do everything you can, and then you would probably have anxiety and not sleep well, and then it would just kind of mess up the whole thing. But point being, if like you were, 50 meters away from the train, you couldn't move fast enough. So I think people need to, I mean, this is getting pretty existential, but like, like remembering like, we're all going to die, right? And I'm not saying that everyone who sleeps poorly is going to have an early death or increased mortality, but like the quality of life is not going to be there. So being able to really have more of that like longevity picture to it, because then like kind of the more you slow down in a way, like you will get more out of things, but you need to like really act not as if your back's against the wall, but also like remembering like, it could be there because as the years go on, you're building a worse habit, a habit of ignoring it and not taking it seriously here. So that's the one aspect in terms of like, people really, kind of being driven by the pain of it. Because there's the preventative group who doesn't do it. But then like kind of the other group are people who are like, they're more driven towards like a goal, right? Of where they could have a reason. Because I'll have a lot of patients who it's like, I just had my first son and I really want to be able to like be there for him and be present, right? Like having something that really pulls you towards that there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because otherwise then it just becomes about like taking gummies and meditating. It's like it's impotent. Your actions are just like just to do it. But like the more you're able to really have a strong reason to do it, that's going to keep your because a lot of what we're talking about, this is not like surgery, right? Of where it's like a acute thing. It's chronic things, ongoing things, continued choices and decisions that will be driven by what you ultimately want. But when people don't like recognize that, then they don't really take any good action.
I mean, listen, doctor. First of all, I appreciate your analogies here, and fact is, you know, this is probably one of the shows that really we need to pay attention to because this is something that is important. As you said, this is not something that's going to happen immediately, but there will be some quick stuff. But the long term, problems are going to get there, and if they get there, maybe too late at one point. And I think that's another issue. If you when you're young, you see that you have a long life ahead of you, but time is going to travel fast. It's going to move so quick, and that party stuff that we all do in the early ages, can catch up to you one way or the other. And the example, and one of the similarities, I mean, I would say it's almost an addiction, right? You know, if you're not sleeping and you kind of get used to it, eventually it's going to affect you in the long term. Well, same thing when you take anything bad for you, it's just going to add up, and eventually you can't get out of it, and it's too late, and maybe it's deadly. And yeah, I love what you said. We're all going to die, but that doesn't mean we want to live in a bad way. We want to be as healthy. As a matter of fact, doesn't matter how long we live, we just want to live healthier until that point, as opposed to suffering along the way and not being physically fit to do a lot of things or mentally fit to do a lot of things. And that's really what this problem would probably wind up. I mean, Alzheimer's, dementia, those are not things that are fun, and I don't think anyone would want to live with them, especially not early in their lives. And so that's definitely one. Now, doctor, we've talked a lot of about how it works, and some of the reasons behind it. Now, so what are some of the treatments that are available to get someone at different stages back to a better state of sleeping? I mean, you mentioned the sleep clinics, but I mean that's one way. But let's talk about like the different, I guess, phases of getting better.
Well, it's going to depend on like what exactly the issue would be, right? So if we kind of come back to our like beginning, middle, end
Mm-hmm.
insomnia here, uh, I would say, I mean, okay, I don't have statistics on which one's more common, and they're pretty even across. And you can have multiple. You can have all three,
Sure.
by the way,
Mm.
if you're really lucky. But it really depends on like one how it shows up, and two, like what are the other things kind of going on? Because like if someone has Hashimoto's, right, that's a autoimmune thyroid disease. If someone has that, that's going to affect sleep, and we need to address Hashimoto's here. They've maybe they have Crohn's disease, right? But those issues notwithstanding, because you will want to address this a lot, then you can focus more on those sleep aspects, right? Of where helping your nervous system kind of come into a nice place there, whether that's like mind body practices or just kind of like not freaking out during the day. Because one of something people don't appreciate, like if you meditate, right? The effect meditation has on sleep is independent of when you meditate during the day. It doesn't have to
Just-
be right before bed. So that's like that nervous system sort of threshold, right? And also like kind of more, I guess, general health sense, making sure like your melatonin is doing well, right? Whether that's like exercising at the right time, like we talked about, or being mindful of your light. Make sure you're getting like morning light because that'll help raise your cortisol. If you're like working out in the morning, that'll help you bring your cortisol up. Or just being stressed out by work in the morning, that will also help, but that's probably not a preferred way. Uh, so those would be like the general health ones because it's uh like because when someone has like a specific medical thing, that's going to give a different flavor of like here, but then also like behaviorally because I mean some people have PTSD, anxiety, all those different components. So that's why when I said like sleep is really like a expression of how your overall health is. So it's not so much like do this for sleep. Now there will be for some instances, right? But for the most part, you want to be able to make sure you're, addressing any sort of medical concerns, health concerns, supplementing sleep as needed with other, lifestyle changes that we've talked about here.
All right. So doctor, you are, I believe, in Florida, but do you work across different states, or people have to physically be with you for a treatment, or there are ways to do this, remotely to assist them when they have,
Yeah,
I
so
guess, yeah.
we offer virtual health coaching services. We're working with people, right, and being able to, you know, I mean, fix your sleep. Okay, that's that's a big part.
Yeah.
But again, because sleep is just a like kind of an outward expression of those underlying issues that come in a lot of different ways. Because sleep is definitely one of the biggest things that improve for people because we get that sort of money back in their budget, so to speak, in their body. But also working with other problems, right? Like some of the ones I mentioned, thyroid, Hashimoto's, gut, a lot of different things because it has a lot of common core commonalities. Sorry, that came in nice
Okay.
little tongue twister there. With your mitochondria there. So that's what we help people with, and being able to help them do it in a very natural lifestyle approach here. Because the thing is, and this is kind of hard to face, whether you know it or not, because like there is a certain point in everyone's life where you have this epiphany that the food you ate or eat affects how you feel. Okay, like it may happen when you're in your teens, it may happen when you're 20, but there's this sudden realization that like, wait,
Hmm.
you're telling me what? Like there's that moment, and it seems so silly.
Eureka.
Yeah, but like not only is there that, but like also like some people listening to this may have been like, this is the first time I've ever heard a light at night affect. Like there's so many of these things that we're not aware of that, a lot of education is what we do, and being able to help them identify what are those things in their life so that they're able to address things very holistically and be in a place of once they're working with us, allowing them to have better sleep and, whether that's cognitive function coming back online, having the energy to really, show up, be more present. That's where we bring people.
Thank you. So one thing you mentioned just briefly, I think you referred to like the food stuff. Is there an actual diet that affects people's sleep? I mean,
I mean,
because we hear a lot of diets today. I mean,
yeah, there's not
from
really. So
okay,
there's kind of two conversations around this. So there's the whole like these foods contain melatonin, whether it's pistachios and tart cherry juice are going to be the top two. I'm not going to entertain kiwis because kiwis are just gross. I hope I just didn't insult like a whole user base. But anyway, the thing is when you ingest things with melatonin, what do we? It goes into your gut, right? And actually, most of it stays in your gut. So eating is not going to be the most effective thing, especially when it's actually properly digested. Now, with like the other school of thought, and this depends on someone's like metabolism. So like some people who they go very low carb, that'll really hurt their sleep, right? Or some people like they must have honey or some sort of snack before they go to bed. The, those aren't necessarily, milk and honey is good for sleep. That's not what the headline should read.
okay, right.
What the headline is that there are these underlying metabolic issues that are covered up by, I mean, usually carbohydrate is kind of the number one mainstay there. So that's why you want to spend more time addressing that because a diet can kind of cover it up, but it's not something you want to hang your hat on.
So you basically assess what the source of the problem is. I mean, by obviously surveying them and asking like what some of the things. If they have any existing conditions, then those will be the first things you would observe and eventually determine if that's a link to the sleep. I guess deprivation they have or issues they have, and then ultimately work your way around it. And then you set up I guess a system of I guess preventative mode and method and program for them to follow. And so if someone comes to you, what is a typical term? I'm assuming that varies from one person, but what would be an expectation for someone that has a problem to see some results eventually?
The like the timeline.
Yeah. I mean,
So
if I come to you right now and I'm completely in bad with my sleep, what would be like I mean, that's the first I'm going to ask you. Like, how long will it
uh
take me to get back to a normal pattern? I mean, and I'm sure that everybody's going to have a different way,
yeah.
to get that.
So what I like to tell people is, and what is true as well, people have shifts within like 2 to 3 weeks. Now, there are some people who it's like 2 days and I get an email and they're like, how are you, Harry? This, like, that will happen, but I don't want to set that expectation for everyone. So when it's day 3, they're like, why is this not like, let's 2 3 weeks, you start to see some improvements there, noticeable improvements. Then in terms of as time goes on, it really does depend on like, what's the severity of this issue because it's correcting how your body can like is it making the right neurochemicals, is it like kind of getting back into this good alignment and function there, but then beyond that is like your body now has to heal, right? And that can only go so fast there. So depending on like that kind of stage, like now things are healing, that will determine it. So like just as a few examples, like whether we've had people who they've been sleeping like 4 hours a night for like 5 years and they're on Klonopin, which is a really strong drug. That's somewhere let's say 2 to 6 months of where they're like, oh wow, this is great. And they can even have that conversation with the prescribing provider about being able to safely adjust that medication, again, in a safe fashion, of course, speaking with that prescribing provider. Or let's say less severe, someone who's like, there'll be oh, my baby is now falling asleep throughout the day, right? But in the interim, my sleep has been absolutely destroyed and it's not coming back. What do I do? That's more like a 4 to 8 week scenario there, and then
All
everything
right.
in between.
Well, thank you. I mean, just for people just to have an expectation. Ultimately, like everything else, if it depends on how long you've been suffering and how long this situation, has been happening, then obviously that determines the length of, the cure or the phase of getting better, right? Now you mentioned the thyroid and all these other things as root causes, right? That just leads me to a question. Especially for women with, let's say, thyroid issues or menopause or even menses, is there a correlation to sleep, problems at that point? And is there a way to assist them?
Yeah.
But
So,
just,
so uh, for how do I want to go through the female reproductive life cycle? So, um, let's start with reproductive age first. So, estrogen and progesterone are very important for sleep here. So if someone gets hormone replacement therapy, if they get put on progesterone, like one of the things they'll say is like, wow, I sleep so much better, sort of deal. And the reason for that links back up to our friendly mitochondria, because those two hormones, if we want to think about like estrogen's like the transmission of it. So like you don't have your foot on the gas, but the car's still moving. Okay. That's estrogen for your kind of metabolic engine here. Progesterone, that's the gas here. Okay. That's why women during like ovulation, body temperature will go up, or like peak athletic performance will be at that time because progesterone there. Okay. So if in any fashion or any way those hormones are low, that will affect sleep there. Now for menopause, this is also, I mean, okay, I'm not sure if people actually say this. It was maybe one research paper, and I just think it's funny. They called it melatonin pause during
okay.
menopause
All right.
because
All right.
uh, when you have that sudden, just like, because basically menopause is like, you know, it just completely takes away estrogen and doesn't give your body a predictable sort of time scale. Like, is it coming back? I don't know. Maybe because the definition of menopause is like you haven't had menses for like 12 months. Okay. Pretty long time period. In between there, women can be perimenopause. They go 6 months, menstruate. You're not in menopause yet. So that unreliableness of estrogen will essentially take away your transmission. Okay. Which is everybody's like heart dropping moment if your car hasn't stopped and someone's told you on the phone, and then you're already imagining like $5,000 now gone.
Yeah.
And that's what that does to your mitochondria. Okay, it doesn't steal $5,000 from your mitochondria. That's a lot of Netflix, but it prevents them from producing that melatonin at a certain level. So that's why melatonin levels like drop dramatically during menopause. So the second sort of clinical area for melatonin use, because we talked about jet lag before.
Mhm.
Second one that's been shown to be effective beyond 6 months, because when you look at these big studies that look at a bunch of different studies, they're called meta-analyses or systematic reviews. There's really not any research besides the population I just mentioned, there's really nothing showing melatonin being effective beyond 6 months, like ever. And if it is, it's like you fall asleep 8 minutes faster. Great. But in menopause, that can actually offset a lot of the sleep problems there. So that's another use case scenario that's been demonstrated by research there.
So, so, so definitely at menopause, there's going to be a lack of sleep and a difficulty, falling, and so you'll have to supplement to a degree, or seek treatment to be able
Yeah, well,
to kind
it
of.
depends, because like if someone, like let's say they go on hormone replacement therapy, then like you wouldn't need that because the problem is because of estrogen being too low, or whether women eat a certain way or take certain supplements to help augment estrogen at the time that could offset the need for melatonin. So um, yeah, there's a lot of different ways there.
Well, again, I mean, it's definitely, I mean, a big question because I mean, I've had a few discussions of about menopause and perimenopause, and and especially for active women in that particular age group, but even like younger, as you said, the menses. But I love what you said that because of that, I mean, there's a spike, so it's a different way, and when menopause is the opposite, it's all stopping. So that's that. So the hormones are an important, piece of this metabolism and equation here in terms of the sleep patterns. Now, for the guys, I guess we have a different way. I mean, is there anything similar to the guys that are listening right now?
Uh, Not necessarily, because like because estrogen and progesterone are gonna be bigger players than sleep. Testosterone, well, I guess there is. It's kind of on the other side. So TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, that can actually make sleep worse. So research has shown if you, and this is sleep apnea, which is a lot of times patients with sleep apnea, they'll also be low in testosterone, right? So I'm going to sound mean, but the brilliant thought is let's testosterone because it's low. Come on, let's do it. But then that will actually increase the amount of apneic episodes, or when you stop breathing at night. And the reason is, this isn't really well fleshed out, so we're going to go out on a little bit of a limb, is that testosterone affects your respiratory centers in your brain there. That's not really super well painted out how exactly that happens, but that's what was implicated from that study.
Well, doctor, that's a big thing because I've read more recently that testosterone is at its lowest in the man, in the last couple of decades. So it's actually there's a huge decrease of testosterone in males in general. So I'm assuming we're all going to have a problem sleeping in this particular equation here. So it's so the good news is it's good for business. We you're going to have more of us reaching out for you.
Well,
But
it's yeah, I would presume that you could probably find some sort of sweet spot here where it's like not too high, like a Goldilocks amount there. Because the thing is, because that study was not necessarily in men who didn't have sleep apnea. It was in men who already had sleep apnea. So it's again when you like combine something with an underlying medical condition, you're gonna get something different. So it may not be the case.
all right, well, thank you. Listen, doctor, I think we exceeded the hour, but I couldn't stop. I had to ask these couple of questions. Now, in your practice, obviously, you do the consultations, you do all the stuff. There's a protocol that you use with the people. Do you use the sleep clinics as if they're required or needed? And if let's say someone is not in your area, would
Usually,
you? Yeah.
usually when people come to us, they already have that data because
Okay.
people, yeah, people like the whole journey is usually someone goes to the doctor, and then maybe they go to sleep specialist, maybe they get a CPAP. Then like 5 years, they're like, I hate this CPAP, and like, or maybe it like never really worked for them very well, and just like they're pretty far into it there. So typically, we're not really working with someone who's like, I've been tired the last 5 days. What do you think is going on? I don't know. What do you think was going on? But usually people they've sleep tracker data. Those are things. Those will be like more kind of close term, but um, typically, we're not gonna. Someone's already at that point. It's not like we don't like. Yep, we checked. Your sleep's still really bad.
Well, so technically, they come to you. They're already like way past that point. Now it's time to to make the miracle happen and shift things around for them.
Yeah,
So,
no pressure. Yeah, yeah.
well, I mean, listen, it's great to have you. I mean, think about this. I mean, a lot of people are going through that first steps and they're assuming that they're going to get results. But eventually, when everything shuts down, there is still light at the tunnel, and that's you guys. At least to there is a way to get back, and so that's great news to hear. And thank you for doing the work you do. So that being said, Doc, how can people reach out to you if they needed to get some connection and some consultation with you?
Yeah, so the best place would be to our website. Okay, so that'll be optimalcircadianhealth.com, which is, if I could make the website longer, I would. Uh, but it's optimal, and then circadian is CIRCADIAN, health.com.
All right. Um, so that's it, Doctor. Thank you so much for really being with us today. I mean, I've learned a lot. It was fun, and you've shared a lot, a lot of things that probably our audiences would not have heard before or known about. I mean, ultimately, we covered a lot of grounds. So what would be some of the words of advice or wisdom that you want to share with our audiences before we close out for the day?
Oh, words of advice. The
Hmm.
Why is this the
Always
hardest question? Oh man, I let me tell you about like biophysics. Um,
take care of yourself, right?
take care of yourself, love each other. Okay, I love it. Um, I think being able to, I think like I don't mean to say like take your health seriously, but like I think a lot of times we wait like until something is broken, right? Like irrevocably broken, right? Where it's like I will never forget like the very first patient interaction I ever had, ever. Like I'm talking about like volunteering at a hospital. Like that must have been like 17 years. I don't know. But like it was someone who came in and this is taking a turn for the better, but like he was like, yeah, so I'm having this bleeding from my bottom. And the nurse is like, how long has it been going on for? 5 years. So like,
Mm,
it's an example and a story, but like it doesn't need to be bleeding. It can be whether it's like, your kids know you as like what mood are they going to be in because you're tired, all right? Or like people don't even bother making plans with you anymore because they know it's already going to be no. Or like you're passing up, opportunities at work. You're like those signs that like who you are and how you operate in the world are deteriorating. It's not aging. Don't brush it off. It's like really in a moment where you catch yourself having to say like it's not that bad. No, 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 no. There's only one type of person who says to themselves it's not that bad. It's when it's that bad. So for that person being able to like, recognize like who you can still be and just fixing issues, that's all it is. And not to keep pushing through. And then for the people who, they're like we said, they're pretty far along in this journey here. Okay. Because the biggest thing those people still need to see is possibility. Okay. Because like we'll have people that are like, oh, mitochondria, like they'll kind of already kind of close things out because like they just in that pattern of being defeated, not having the hope. But like if you continue to have that, it doesn't matter if like, every major religious character comes down and is like says like here's your solution. You're already closed off to it. So the more you can be able to like step back into a place of possibility and recommit to like, what you can overcome and who you can be, that's going to be, really, I mean, honestly, better any advice. I mean, I think the advice or little tips I gave were kind of, good, but like, like being able to really reclaim that you can overcome this and who you can still be, that's the most important because once you're at that level, then whatever tool you are given or guidance you receive, you're able to get that much more out of that there. So that there's my wisdom.
well, it's a lot of it. Well, but I mean, listen, dear doctor. I mean, you would think it's common sense, but unfortunately, we all are, I guess, guilty to a degree or another where we know things, but we just kind of ignore things because we think it's not as much. But at the end of the day, we got to take care of business, and we don't have to wait too long if things are not there. So, doctor, it was fun. I appreciate, every little nugget that you shared with us today. Again, this is a big part of our lives. I mean, sleep is, what is it, a third of our lives? I mean, we're supposed to actually at least, do that. And if we don't, then it affects the other, whatever, 2/3 of our lives. So it's an important piece, and we need to pay attention to it and don't ignore it and take care of it. And folks, as you're listening and watching, if you do have a problem and you've tried everything, you don't know, now we have a resource that you can actually reach out to. Dr. Dylan, he's out there, he's doing the work. So if you're not sure, reach out and see what you can get out of it, and hopefully you'll get the results. 2 or 3 weeks is not too shabby. I think we can all live 2 weeks, 3 weeks to actually enjoy a better life eventually if we need to. So don't hesitate. And again, this is a worldwide show. I'm not sure, doctor, if someone calls you from a different country, does that apply? Or I mean, as long as they can pay, I guess that's fine.
As long as I mean, my Spanish is pretty rough, but as long as we can communicate.
Oh, then that's easy. Well, I mean, I think English is the world language right now, so I think we're pretty good with that. So
I'm still
hopefully,
trying to figure out English, but yeah, I
well,
understand.
yeah. I mean, there's different levels of English, but you know what I mean. So, but at least I think that's an easy way to communicate. But folks, there you have it. I mean, there's no excuse if you're out there and you have an issue with your sleep and you've tried things and it's not working. I mean, you've heard the logics, you've heard the science. That's not doing anything. You need someone's expert. Well, Dr. Dylan Petkus is going to make a difference for you. So make sure you connect with him. And so if you go to my website, you click on his picture, you'll be able to go to him directly. And of course, there will be a link as well in the description of the show. So there you have it. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And folks, this is the end. I'm Hurricane H. We'll be talking soon. New day, new show, new topic. Bye for now.